Perfect. So software development lifecycle environment. Some of us may have heard about this before. We may be new to the concept or we may understand how this works, but we're all here to learn together. So what is a software development lifecycle environment? What is an environment to start with? Let me go with the simple dictionary definition, your physical surrounding. So in software development, environments is where all the magic happens, right? Controlled areas for maybe development. There's another environment for QA. We have where we do staging, and then the environment, the production environment, which is live, like Zoom. This is Zoom production environment where we have access to the features that organizations have to offer. And each environment has specific purposes for which it's set up. Now, I wanted to add that different organizations will follow different procedures. It's all about budget and their understanding of what they need. Some organizations don't have all the environments that I'll be mentioning in the next slide. So I wanted to state that. And environments are usually provisioned by servers, right? It's a collection of the hardware, the software, and everything that developers and testers need to build applications. So when I say hardware and software, their local environment, like the laptop, you need an operating system, you need a language, a coding language, you need all the good stuff that it's required for you to have a complete environment to do your work. Okay, so there are different types of environments. Like I mentioned earlier, some organizations do not believe in having the staging environment. It's surprising, but it's true. So we have development environment, we have QA, or what most people call testing environment. We have staging or pre-production environment where UAT happens. And then we have the live or production environment where you and I have access to the new features. So I will state again, not everyone will tell you, let's have a special QA environment because they think it's a waste of money. There are organizations who believe in doing QA in the dev environment, but let's focus on the ideal situation here. So development environment, QA and testing environment, the staging or pre-production environment, or some people call it UAT environment, and then live or production environment. So the dev environment, this is where it all begins. So what happens in the dev environment? Here is where the developers will begin to turn that idea that the product owner and the business has into code, right? They need to write that script, they need to write that code, they have that source code and they build it and they're trying to write something that will become an application in the end. This environment is usually the local environment where developers will be in there and do all their work. The reason they have local environments is because you don't want to work on something and you're hindering somebody else from making progress. So you want to have a secluded environment where you can work on your code, do your testing and all of that, and you're not breaking what somebody else is building. So most developers will have the development environment on their local machine, so they can do all the coding that they do. They can work freely and you're not impacting anyone. And in dev environments, you don't have access to live data like you have in production. You know, most of them, let's imagine that it's a CI/CD practice that you have in your organization. They have a version control, a repository where they will just go in there and pull code and then do what they need to do and push it back in there. So you can call a development environment the workstation of that the individual contributor or developer. I've heard developers say that the development, oh, I was distracted by the question. Okay, I'll answer you at the end of the class. Please hold that thought. So the dev environments exist on the developer's local on the laptop. They call it local environment. Now, like I said earlier, people do things differently in their organizations, right? But we're following the ideal steps. Local environment, right? This is where you can do whatever you need to do and test all the changes that you make. You write a line of code, you make that code fail the test, you adjust the code, and then make it pass, and then commit it to your repository and all that life cycle stuff that happens. So I also shared with us already why we should have local environments and separate dev environments. There are arguments out there that we should not separate the two, that dev and QA should be in one place, but I do not agree. We need to separate dev from QA. So let's go to the next slide. The next one is QA. Now, the QA environment. So first of all, quick story. I had the opportunity of working with a platform team that set up a QA environment. There was a lot of negotiation with the business trying to explain why we should have a QA environment. Why should we have a separate QA environment? Well, it's simple. Let dev do their business in dev environment and let completely different, have your QA separated from dev environment so you can do rigorous testing. You can do the functional testing and all of that. The dev environment is limited. The QA testing environment is supposed to kind of mimic the production environment so that you can do those functional tests. For example, let's assume Mama T is a developer. Sorry, Mama T, I have to use your name. Let's imagine that she's a developer, right? She's written her code and she's very satisfied. She's done her JUnit testing. Everything is good. They have a CI/CD pipeline. The Jenkins server has seen that, okay, she committed a code. Jenkins starts to build that code. Everything is good. And then she commits it to, if everything is good, she commits it to the QA environment. When we get in there, what's happening is there's already test plans and test scripts, test cases that these QA guys need to go through. Now, whether it's manual or automated testing, that depends on what the organizations are doing, right? I would prefer that it's automated. That way we can work even faster. So that's where we're actually testing to see if, for example, if we're creating a new button on the OBA website, Mama T commits a code, she pushes, everything is good, and it gets to the QA environment, we're checking to see if that new button actually works. When I click on that new button, does it take me to where I need to go? For example, if the new button is for a new registration, right? When I click on that button, am I able to register? Or also if it's for login and passwords, if I use the wrong passwords, am I still able to get into the system? So we're doing that thorough quality assurance. So we're following the test scripts and making sure that there is no bugs. We're identifying where the system is acting in the opposite direction. So some organizations are beginning to say that they would prefer that the QA team is somewhere else and dev team somewhere else, because sometimes you have developers saying, oh, come and do QA in my environment. But yeah, this is what happens in the QA environment. We're testing overall quality of the application. Is everything good? Is it functioning properly? If we are to push this into production, would there be any issues? And usually most people have that test script, the test scripts, and then they have the pass or fail. Is it passing the test? Is it failing the test? The outcome of that will determine if it's pushed to UAT or not. So if it fails, there's some kind of communication tool. For example, most organizations use Slack. The developer who committed that code to the repository will be notified. Well, something is wrong with your code. In this case, it's Mama T, right? Something is wrong with your code. She has to do rework. And thank God for version control. Let's just say something gets messed up with that code. You can go back and pull a previous version of your code from the repository. All right, so staging, pre-prod, UAT, every environment, organization they have different names for this environment. So in staging, what we're trying to do is to see, let's say we're in the real live production environment. Is everything good? I've had the opportunity to be part of UAT. So you would have scenarios that you need to test. You're assuming that you're in production and it's a real life situation. We're testing to see that this build, this new feature, this new function it's quality, right? It's functioning well, like we're in production. We have access to real life data. It's close to real life data as possible, but the select few of the maybe business users or even customers are allowed to test this. It's close to live, but it's not live. It can't break anything in the actual live environment. So there's also a lot of debate about really having staging or pre-production environment or not. Well, I don't think there should be a debate about that. So the goal is to ensure that if it's successful in the staging environment, we're close to 100% sure that everything will be in production. Because sometimes bugs will miss the dev environment, the QA environment, but you can catch it in the UAT environment. In UAT environment, you're not just testing for functionality, you're also trying to test user experience. There was a reason we created that new button. Is it satisfying the need of the customer? If not, then that's where we have a problem. We have to go back to the drawing board and fix things. But it's good to have this kind of environment so that we can catch any issues real quick. So this is more on the staging and pre-production environment. So we do what we call smoke testing to ensure, like I mentioned earlier, to ensure that everything is working as it should. We're trying to see, with all the test scripts that we have, if an end user were to have access to this, is it given what it's supposed to give? Is it effective? Did we ask you to build something else and you're building a button that is confusing the users? Is it making life easier like it was planned? When I click that button, does it really take me anywhere, or it's just not even doing anything? The goal is to ensure that we test properly in staging. So when we go to production, everything is good and everybody's high-fiving and we're proud of what we've been able to develop. So UAT, that's what happens in the UAT pre-pod staging environment. So usually you'd have test scenarios, for example, to test every and all possible scenarios that the user is going to encounter in the live environment. And then, did it pass? You would note it, yes, it passed. Did it fail? You'd also note that down. And then, of course, the results from that would determine if we're ready to release or not. Now, let's go to the fun part, production environment. I'm sure a lot of us are already familiar with this because we are all end users and we are all consumers. This is where you have access to that new feature. For example, WhatsApp video. That wasn't there before. And now we have that function, right? Now it's running on the production server. You and I can access it. All the work that the developers have been doing, all the new features that they've been building, now the customers can have access to it. And every production environment should be able to handle twice, if not more, amount of traffic than you're expecting, because you don't want anything to break in production. You don't want a situation where you cannot handle the load that's coming into your website. Customers are very, very fickle. 1 minute they're singing your praise, just one bug and they're running to the next best thing. So how good and how great is your production environment? This one is pretty self-explanatory. So production environment also, the data there is restricted. Not everybody can have access to it. In fact, developers do not have access to production environment. Most organizations have approval processes for us to even commit anything into production. So you have to go through all that step, agile or not, before you can release something to production. And that's actually a quick run through of the different environments. Thank you guys for listening. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anything you need me to shed more light on? I'll be more than happy to. Let me look in the chat.